All right, welcome. My name is Mr. Arman. In fact, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And I'm going to try to help you today with your short story project, which I'm sure a lot of you are finding rather daunting, particularly if you've not completed the previous week's assignments. But I'm sure you have, right? Right? Maybe not. So what I'm going to be doing is trying to help you put it all together. How do I get from the ideas out here and in here down to the page here, and maybe even, if you're lucky, into something like this that goes out to the public. It doesn't. So what I wanted to stress to you, though, is that this does not happen magically or spontaneously. It happens as a result of planning, preparation, and practice. So you may or may not be aware, but we've had a lot of different assignments building up to this particular moment, and there are no shortcuts. As a matter of fact, if you do that planning in advance, you're going to have a better outcome. I find that's the case. There are a lot of writers who are way smarter than I am, who've published books and made lots of money, bestsellers and award-winning books that have used this process that we have been doing in class to help make their writing better. And I hope you've been taking this seriously. But first of all, I'm going to show you how I've done it. So last night, actually, I was working on my latest book, and I wrote about 1,800 words. Now, if you're doing the prose version of this short story project, you're going to want a story that's maxes out about 1,000 words. And that may sound like a lot to write. It is. Like I said, I wrote 1,800 words just last night, and it only took me a couple hours, maybe 2 hours tops, I think. Now, granted, I'm much more practiced at it, but really it came down to the story began to gel and write itself when I did all this preparation. So if you've been skipping around, or if you are not sure why are we doing this thing and this thing, I'm going to help you put it all together. But let me first start with just showing you a fragment of what I've written, and then hopefully you'll get to see how all that preparation made this possible. So let me just share with you really quickly the story that I wrote yesterday. It's called Sweet Dreams Are Made by Natsuna. Once upon a time, a girl was born. Her parents named her Natsuna from the old Orlonian for summer, because she was born 5 days after midsummer according to the standard calendar, and because she was as sweet as a summer's day. Her father, the best tanner in all of it, also nicknamed her Pickle, because she enjoyed watching him pickle the leather while she sucked on a spiced cucumber. By the way, pickling is actually a thing you do with leather. I looked it up. Though her family was not rich or landed, Natsuna's childhood was like a dream, until Fiorian soldiers invaded and burned her home to the ground. The family fled the city and migrated for months without a home, with no belongings save for what they could carry on their backs. They went to Lutece, but were forced to flee because of the riots, and then to Valenro, where they found part of the city had been destroyed by the Fiorians during a great battle between their mighty dragon's breath weapons and the maiden's forces. Natsuna's father was desperate to keep his family fed, taking any work that he could get his hands on, whether it was mending saddles for mercenary men headed for the front, or slopping pigs for a minor fief and his wife. Finally, one day, he heard of a special place where one could live free and earn land so long as you could prove that you had skills of value to the community. It was a new town, being built from virtually nothing on the high plains to the west. It was to be called Angers, and was to be established outside the domain system of dukes and barons that had ruled Orloins for centuries. "We're going," the father announced one day at breakfast as he held his daughter, who was now almost a grown woman, in his arms. He cared nothing about the Dark Lady or the Dead Maiden's plans to reshape Orloins into a paradise of equality and generosity for all. All he cared about was finding a place where he and his family could find a forever home, and a place where he could keep his sweet Pickle, the girl who glided when she walked like like the breeze on a summer's day, safe from harm. For her part, Natsuna adored her father and treasured her special place in his heart. To her, he was the stars and the moon, the rough hand that kept the wild dogs at bay, and the tender but parched lips that kissed her good night every evening before bedtime. Until suddenly, it seemed to him, he wasn't. Okay, so that's a nice little, little tale. It's got, of course, some inciting actions. Namely, we've got her house getting burned down to the ground and having to flee, and all these complicating events, which climaxes in the father deciding to take them to Angers, where their life is a lot better, until we have a resolution here that, oh no, my little girl has grown up. Yes. So it doesn't necessarily it starts off with once upon a time, which makes you think it's going to have a happy ending. But for at least one person in the story, namely Natsuna's father, it may not be the happiest ending, because his daughter's growing up. She wants to move out and get married. Okay, so how did I get to this point? How did I get, now this is a draft, so it may have some errors. It may need some polish, but I'm pretty happy with it. The way I put it together. So how did I get to this point, at least? Well, first of all, a couple weeks ago, we had you create a character. I started with a character. So if you've not done this yet, here is the character development worksheet. I'm going to share a copy of this. You're going to make a copy of it, so for yourselves. And but this is what you had to do to get your character. So I created a character sheet for Natsuna, of course. I could have also done one for her dad, because he's an important player. But as you can see here, you have to answer these questions. Natsuna, of course, I just started making things up. So not all of these things did I use in the story, but this helps me get inside the head of my character. What are her desires? What are her fears? What are her hopes for the future? And a few things about her. In fact, I have to be able to visualize her. Her not only personality, but the way she physically looks, because I need to describe those things with words. As you can see here, she's 20 years old. Yes, I'm very happy with my age because I'm young and in love. Aw, she's such a cutie. You can see here, I put that she's told that she's pretty, which suggests to me that she is pretty, but she doesn't think of herself in that term. She's not vain. She's happy, honest, loving. Those are three things she would use to describe herself. She doesn't like to travel. Well, she did a lot of traveling, but not for the good reasons. Because of the war, she was homeless for many months and had to travel around. Things about her financial situation, right? So her father is a tanner. It says here, we don't have a lot of money, but enough that I can save for a nice dress sometimes. So you can see how these questions are deliberately poised. This is by this is a workshop that author Neil Gaiman used to help beginning authors get a good grip on what their characters are like. So you can see here with my answers that she likes to cook, she likes to garden. The objects she had as a kid are very telling, right? She had a little dolly made out of straw, right? So that tells you not particularly rich, but she had a toy. She also had a spatula. So what kid thinks, oh boy, I got a spatula? But this shows that from an early age she liked to cook. And then she also had a flower pot for growing her first vegetables. So sweet. So she is a sweet character. One thing I want to make you understand is that when you build your characters, whether they are as sweet and nice and innocent as little Natsuna here, or if they are tough guys, mafia bosses, bounty hunters, what have you, you have to find some way of making your characters likable to the readers. They don't have to be good people, but there has to be something about them, some motivating factor that that the reader can empathize with. Even the worst villain has something about them. For example, Thanos is a good example from the Marvel movies. He's horrible. He snaps his fingers and he erases half the universe. What could get more awful than that? Except that when you examine his motives, the fact that he wants to make the universe better, he sees that there's overcrowding in planets. He realizes that resources are going to run thin, and then that's going to be worse for the people living in the universe, for everybody. So he realizes, well, one way to fix the universe is just to get rid of half the people. That way, there's plenty of resources to go around. It's just his methods that are just horribly evil, right? So we can at least empathize with his motives, even if his methods are just dramatically evil. And he has no moral compass, really. So you have to find that key that unlocks your character, that will make them believable and complex, but also likable in some way, whether they're a villain or they're Natsuna and everybody loves them. Pretty much everybody loves them. Or if they don't like her, they eventually grow to love her. The other thing you had to do was go to Hero Forge and make yourself a character. It is free to make a character. You don't have to log in or what have you. As you can see here, I made her character. As you can see here, she's got such a cute face, lovely braids. She dresses in bright colors because she's a happy person overall. No matter what happens to her, she tends to be happy. And don't forget, you have to write a reflective paragraph after that, kind of giving some. You can give some backstory here. Why does she wear the clothes she does? Why does she carry what? She has something in her hand. What is that about? Why does she style her hair the way she does? If she has any scars, tattoos. I didn't make her with scars or tattoos, but if she had any, I'd probably want to explain that too. So that is how I developed the character of Natsuna. And now after I did that, it really came in clear. Her voice comes across very clearly in my mind. So I could almost, at this point, I could almost have a conversation with you and pretend to be her. I could role play her as her character and just talk in her voice, which is really ideal. Now, I don't expect that you will be able to do that initially. It may still take some time for you to grow into this character, but getting to understand your character is very important. Because the next step was to create, you had to do some world building for us. So you went from character to setting. And if you have a character who is complex with some strengths and maybe some weaknesses, some flaws, some desires, you have the makings of a plot. But until you put the character in her proper setting, you might not have a story yet. So what you had to do next was you had to create a map of where does this person live. Now, as you can see here, I made 3 maps. One of the entire world. For a fantasy world, it's really important to make a map of the whole world. I'm going to show you really quickly what my map looks like. And these maps do not need to be overly complicated or detailed. I just made note of the various places. So you may notice, right? So you may notice that we talked about Olivet, right? And we talked about Lutece, and we talked about Valenro, and now they live in Angers. Notice that this map helped me figure out where they were going. So if they were fleeing Olivet, where would they go? Well, if they're going north, they would wind up in Lutece. And since Lutece is the capital, that's probably most likely where they would flee to. And finding the riots, where would they go next? Well, if they went north, they'd probably wind up in Valenro. And then if they went, after they didn't find what they were looking for there, they might go west to Angers. where they might have heard of this particular place that was being established. So, and you can see I've got the geography here. You can see this is mostly flatlands. We got forests down here. We got mountains. So being able to visualize this gives me a couple of advantages. One is it again shows me where people would go. So I didn't know initially. I had her backstory is that she was in Olivet, and her house got burnt to the ground by invaders. So then I used this map to kind of plan out. Okay, well they're refugees then. Where would refugees go from Olivet? They could have gone many different places, but I thought, okay, this seems to be the most logical, reasonable way, the way I've set up this map. And then it, of course, shows me how long would it take to get to one place to another. Keep in mind that this is a continent, so continent probably about the size of Europe, or maybe at least Europe, maybe as large as Africa. So it wouldn't be like, oh, let's just take a day trip to Lutece. This would have taken them days, if not weeks, to get from one place to another. The shortest distance would take about 3 or 4 days. And the longer distances, say from Valero to Angers, might have taken a couple weeks, given that there might be no roads there, and given that the technology level of this culture, they're still using horse and wagon. So they don't have like planes or trains and stuff. So another map, let me go back to the maps here. So for those who are not doing fantasy or science fiction literature, you might not need a world map. But what you might need is a city-wide map or a community-wide map, and that's what I had to do as well, because I felt, okay, she's in Angers, and a lot of the action in the story is going to take place in this town. So I wanted to know, for example, where does she live, right? So I made her, there's the Tanner's house, right? And there's her garden. So I got really detailed. Of course, she has a boyfriend, and her boyfriend lives at the Prancing Pony Inn because he's a newcomer to town. She met him just the year before when he visited her town. So this maps can be very helpful in trying to figure out locations and travel times, and just generally speaking, if she's going from one place to another, where's she, what's she going to do? Maybe she's going to pass through the town square where there's a marketplace, buy some things on the way to her boyfriend's house. Who knows? So making a map is really kind of important. Also, you had to create something in this website called World Anvil. And why was that important? Well, this gives you another place you can put your maps. It collects all of your background information about your world in a major location. But I also had you create a timeline. So let me just go ahead and open that up for you. And again, you don't have to put every little detail of what happened in your world. And if you're dealing with the real world, think about major historical events that might have impacted your characters' lives. For example, if they were born in, 1994, a person would have been 6 or 7 years old when 9/11 happened. That would have a big impact on such a young person. Whereas my nieces were born in 2002, that would be to them basically ancient history. But as you can see here, I put in major historical events when the Furians invaded her country, when major historical people, figures like the Maiden was born, and then the Siege of Olivet was important because that's when her house got burned down. And so she would have been on the run from the year 44 until about the year 45. So many months she was on the run. Her family was homeless and drifting between as refugees. So, and it wasn't until year 46 that we had the volcano eruption. So these are major events, and I hope you see that some of those got used in the story. But it helped me figure out, okay, if she's 20 years old now, how old would she have been at this event? And so she might have been, still pretty, about maybe 17, 18. So still with her family, not of age yet. And then when did she arrive at the town of Angers? What age was she? So that kind of gives me some basis, some reference as to what's going on. So that let me just go ahead and show back to the short story. So now that when you look at the short story, and I'm going to read it one more time, notice how all the details that I built informed what I wrote here again. So now you can see that it didn't come from thin air. All this helped me prepare for what I was doing. So it says here again, once upon a time, a girl was born. Her parents named her Natsuna from the Old Orlonian for summer because she was born 5 days after midsummer, according to the standard calendar, and because she was sweet as a summer's day. Notice how the character sheet played a role. I have a general understanding of her personality, and I know that she's generally a good, happy person, a sweet, and of course I want to foreshadow that with the way she's named by her dad, who's very sweet on her. And then I did improvise the name Pickle, right? Her father, the best tanner in Olivet, also nicknamed her Pickle because she enjoyed watching him pickle the leather while she sucked on the spiced cucumber. So again, I know she wants to be a chef, so maybe early on she got a love affair with food. Although her family was not rich or landed, there's some more backstory. Natsuna's childhood was like a dream until Fiorian soldiers invaded and burned her home to the ground. Okay, there again, historical event that I set up on my timeline. I had that for reference. The family fled the city and migrated for months without a home, with no belongings save for what they could carry on their backs. They went to Lutece, but were forced to flee because of the riots, and then to Valenro, where they found part of the city had been destroyed by the Fiorians during the great battle between the mighty Dragon's Breath weapons and the Maiden's forces. So here you see her story is very much intertwined with major historical events in my world's history. Not all of them, but a few of them popped up because I thought about where is she going on the map? And then, okay, so if she's going here on the map and the year is such and such, or the time is such and such, what's going on in these different areas when her family is coming through them? And I realized that pretty quickly, she's going from invasion to riots to another battle to liberate the country and then fleeing to Angers. And of course, I've got the motivation, right? Natsuna loves her father. And of course, that feeling is mutual. Natsuna is a very protective man. And it makes sense that Natsuna would be sweet on him. You can see here, the dad's willing to sacrifice. He says here, Natsuna's father was desperate to keep his family fed, taking any work that he could get his hands on, whether it was mending saddles for mercenary men heading to the front, which makes sense, given the time period it's set in, or slopping pigs for minor fief. That's a ruler, but it's usually like a low-level ruler, and his wife. Finally, one day, they heard of a special place where they could live free and earn a living so long as they could prove that you had skills of value to the community. It was a new town being built from virtually nothing on the high plains to the west. Okay, now we got a direction, right? So I had to go back to my map and go, and I actually got this one wrong when I first wrote it. I had to go back and fix it. So I had to go to the map and go, oh yeah, it's to the west of Lutece, not to the east. I had it set for east. For some reason, I got confused. But that's why you make a map, so that when you get confused, you can keep it consistent. Because I guarantee you, some eagle-eye reader is going to go, "Wait a minute, she wouldn't have gone east, because if she's in Lutece, Angers is to the west." Crazy, right? So, and that would kind of blow the whole thing, the whole disbelief. So we going, he announces, and his daughter, who is now almost a grown woman, right? So I looked at the timeline. She would have been about 17, 18 years old when they headed out to Angers, maybe 19. So she's almost a grown woman, right? He cared nothing about the Dark Lady or the Death Maiden's plans to reshape our loins into a paradise of equality and generosity for all. There's a little backstory. There's historical events going on there again. All he cared was finding a place for his family. So again, you know, I could have made a sheet for him. I did not, but I used my character sheet for Natsuna, because she's such a devoted daughter, loving her daddy. I wanted to give her a father that was worth loving. In this case, a very protective father, maybe a bit overprotective, but very close to his one and only daughter. She is an only child, by the way. So that also kind of reinforces my idea that he's going to be very protective of her, given that he's a dad, she's a daughter, and that's his only child, right? Imagine the devastation one would feel if your only child was killed in a war. So he's going to be very protective of her, as much as he can be. And so that gives her a father that is worth loving. And now we can see why she adores her father, right? It says for her part, Natsuna adored her father and treasured her special place in his heart. To her, he was the stars and the moon, the rough hand who kept the wild dogs at bay, when they're out, being homeless and out in the wilderness trying to be refugees, trying to get to the next place. You might need to worry about wild dogs. And the tender but parched lips that kissed her goodnight every evening before bedtime. He's a hard worker. He's got rough, he's got a rough. So of course his lips might be a little parched because they may not have enough water to drink, or food to eat. So he would go without so long as his daughter could eat. Until suddenly it seemed to him he wasn't. A little surprise here at the end. But we can see that Natsuna is 20. She's 20 years old. And in one point, she's almost a woman. So what's the next natural step for a young lady to take? Well, she might be looking for a husband. And that, of course, is what the rest of the story is. This little vignette here, which is a self-contained story, kind of feeds into the bigger narrative, which is Natsuna has found herself a man that she loves and who loves her honestly and openly, and they're going to get married. Of course, this is going to create conflict for Daddy because Daddy's going to lose his only little girl, and he doesn't much care for the groom either. Okay, but that's another story for another time. Guys, I hope this helps you see not only how to do these different tasks that help you build towards your story, but I hope you see how it all comes together. That this stuff does not happen spontaneously. It happens because I worked hard and I planned it out. And now all that planning really pays off. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you found it useful. But guys, if you have troubles with any of these programs, if you get stuck at some point, which authors still often do, just ask for a teacher. But guys, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you later.